Okay, I'll start a roll call for today's meeting of the Aberdeen City Region Deal Joint Committee on the 24th of July. Councillor Jenny Lane, Chairperson.
Present.
Councillor Jim Gifford, Vice Chairperson.
I'm here. Good morning.
Councillor Marie Bolton.
Present.
Councillor Douglas Lumsden.
Present.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
Present, I'm here.
Councillor Gwyneth Petrie.
Present.
Professor Stephen Logan.
It's Jennifer Craw here. I've just had a message from Stephen. He's having trouble joining the meeting, so he's continuing to try. So not
Okay.
yet.
Okay, I'll try and send him an invite during the meeting as well.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Mr. Patrick Macri.
Patrick's an apology, and I'm the substitute Jennifer Craw again.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. And Serene Wood.
Present.
That's the roll call completed. I'll now hand you back to the chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Masson, for that, and welcome to everybody to today's meeting. We have a few items on the agenda, so if we maybe just work our way through. First is to determine urgent business. We have no urgent business before us today, but we do have one item of exempt business, which is item 8 on the agenda, which is the Aberdeen City Region Deal COVID-19 assessment, the exempt appendices that's in relation to that on the agenda. So can we agree to take that in private?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Item 3, declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Lumsden.
Yes, I'd just like to declare an interest on agenda item 7, just on account that I'm a board member of NHS Grampian and they are mentioned within that report.
Okay,
But
thank
I
you for
do
that.
intend to take part.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Craw, do you have a declaration?
I am a member of the Bio Aberdeen board, as is Professor Stephen Logan.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lumsden, did you want to come back in, or is your hand just up? No, okay, that's fine. I don't see anybody else.
Do I need to declare an interest with one's interest in BioHub?
It may be best if you wish to declare an interest as.
Well, if I need to, yes. I'm not involved directly in BioHub, but because one is clearly sponsoring BioHub, then I guess that's an interest.
Oh, okay, we'll record that. Ms. Craw, did you want to come back in?
And the same would apply for Professor Logan and myself in relation to being directors of Opportunity North East as well.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll take a note. Any other declarations of interest? I'm not seeing any other hands. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, item 4 on the agenda is a change in membership of the Joint Committee. So we have a couple of changes in relation to Aberdeenshire Council representatives. We've got Councillor Gwyneth Petrie, who is replacing Councillor Richard Thompson as a substantive member. So welcome to Councillor Petrie to the first meeting. And we've also got Councillor Anne Ross, who will replace Councillor Colin Pike as a named substitute. Are we happy to agree that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Right, that takes us on to item 5, which is the minute of the previous meeting, which is here for approval. Ms. Richards-Wood, do you want, there's a couple of things maybe that we were perhaps expecting back to this meeting. Do you want to just?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, in regards to the MOU housing, we have a meeting scheduled with the Scottish Government in August, and we will report back to this committee after that meeting. And Transport Scotland have provided an options report. However, we're still waiting on costings, which they will be happy to present at a future meeting when they have them.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Gifford, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on the A comment about the meeting on housing, glad to hear that's been arranged, and if we could possibly take off table a discussion about what might come up at that meeting, because the money that's sitting under housing has not been touched in all the time it's been there, and I think we need to come up with a plan B and how we can spend that.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit at the beginning there. Could you just? I'm not.
So sorry, my broadband's operating on the limit. I'll switch off the video if that's okay with everyone. Is that better?
Yes.
Interesting, there's a meeting housing set up. If we can maybe take off table a discussion about what take forward to that meeting, because that money has been unspent and untouched in all the time it's been allocated. So I think we need a plan B on how we spend it.
Okay, yeah, we'll take that on board. Mr. Sweetnam, did you wish to come in on this item?
Yes, just in response to Councillor Gifford. So both councils, the housing leads and the city region deal programme leads, have met to discuss both the original Plan A, but a more substantive Plan B. So that is in hand.
Okay, thank you for that.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, and I noticed Professor Logan's joined us, so I'm glad we've got that sorted out.
I have, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are we happy to approve the minute? Yeah.
Yep.
Seeing nods, so that take it as read. Okay, that now takes us on to item 6, which is the Aberdeen City Region Deal funding update. Mr. Wood is with us to answer any questions. Is there anything you wish to say about the paper, Mr. Wood, before I open it up for questions?
Chair, good morning. Yes, I would actually. I think there's a number of comments just to run through quickly, if you agree with that before opening up. Is that okay? Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Really to update the Joint Committee on communications that we've had with the Scottish Government around funding and financial governance. There's 5 key elements summarised in the paper, and just to go over those in a little bit of detail, just to give you some background to this. Firstly, with regard to the rollover of funding, we've had confirmation that the total deal funding commitment is there, won't be reneged upon. However, the rollover of funding between years is possible but not guaranteed, and these are conflicting statements. But this is the environment that we have been working in for some time. So, in one sense, it's useful to see the guarantee, but it's not brand new news in that sense. The management of funds across years, it's concerning to some extent that doesn't attract the same level of commitment that we know where we are from year to year. But the availability of funding over the life of the deal has always been assumed. The issue around that is creating cash flow issues for the partners if we are not able to resolve that to our satisfaction. There's a suggestion of financial flexibility without the guarantee of cash flow, and that's not ideal. Therefore, there's an onus placed on the regional partners on how to manage this. These statements, whilst I'm saying they're not synchronised, they're not matched up from a financial perspective, they open up, I think, the revised payment profile discussion, and that's mentioned in the note from the Scottish Government, and therefore discussions around that, I think, would be very, very useful. There's an example that we're using, a real example around BioHub. If BioHub can commence their activity this month, then the cash flow risk to future years, I would say, is minimal from a cash flow perspective. However, that alone doesn't resolve the totality of funding that may be required to complete that project. So there's a wider risk for all deal projects, I think, that we have to consider in the same way that each council will be doing for its current capital plan projects at the moment. Just moving quickly through the rest of the paper, the proposals for improved financial governance, as you've heard me say before, as projects mature and cash demands increase, that payment profile needs to be more reactive and reflective in relation to major projects being delivered. And at present, I would say it's not. Therefore, an annual payment of the full sum within the grant offer letter would mitigate those cash flow problems. It would remove the issue of any rollover challenges, and I would say it would satisfy the commitment of the total deal funding being in place. Hence, that's why the recommendation is in the paper. I do recognise that I am saying cash flow a lot today, but the table at 3.3 on page 6 hopefully bears us out. There are a number of fluctuations in the projects this year, but with a marginal change to the overall bottom line forecasts, therefore demonstrating we can manage the City Region Deal Fund by cash flow management. And this year, we're estimating some £16 million less is likely to be spent than the grant offer. So again, if that money was in, we'd be able to smooth those cash flows out year to year. Accelerated spend, yep, where this is possible, we'll do that, and we'll keep the contact going with the Scottish Government, so we can make them aware of how the project profiles are going. And then the final point is capitalization of resources. This is not something I would be supporting, and this is where the staffing costs, for example, of both councils could be added into the city region deal capitalised sums. If we'd known that at the start when we were submitting the original business cases, we probably would have built that in. But I think now to go back and charge, in effect, a management fee to projects take away from the ability to deliver on the outcome. So we wouldn't be supporting that, certainly at this stage. So, Chair, that's my detail. The recommendations are there, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary, Mr. Reid. That's very helpful. I've got a couple of hands, so I'll take Councillor Gifford first and then Councillor Lumsden.
Yes, Chair. I mean, Alan's covered it very well, but I can maybe just get some clarity on what he said about the cash flow funding in terms of the recommendation and what's in section 3.1. It's just to get clarity that the first bullet point under section 5 and 3.1, that the cash flow, temporary cash flow funding is what we've previously agreed through CRD and we took through council, which is the short-term funding of invoices coming in before the cash is available. It's not a wider subsidising of the CRD projects over the years. It's just that short-term bankrolling of the invoice money.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, in November 2019, a paper was considered by Aberdeenshire Council because we handle the funds of City Region Deal, and at that point, as we saw some of the projects maturing, the amounts that they were requesting were becoming more significant, heading towards £100,000 being what I mean by significant. And at that point, we were still debating with the Scottish Government about the timing of receipt of their monies. So this was put in as in case we needed it. So to date, I'm checking the figures and happy to provide those to committee. 1 or 2 occasions where we've had to put money out to projects in advance of receiving that. Now, at this stage, it isn't a material financial consideration. We're estimating it would cost about £2 per day to fund £100,000. Now, clearly not a financial issue, but there's a principle here. So the council have got agreement to do that, but that was absolutely short-term, temporary, until the money came in 1, 2 or 3 weeks after we'd paid the money out. So that agreement's in place, and I have to report back to the Infrastructure Services Committee on the details of that. It's an example of how, when the projects are maturing, cash flow is really important, hence the recommendation in the report, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lumsden?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a question around 3.5. So it says that both councils continue to fund these positions, and I know I understand it's not capitalised, but is it still funded from within the City Region Deal envelope? You know, staff time from both councils.
Through you, Chair. No, it's not. We took a decision early on in the City Region Deal that, for example, my time would still be met by Aberdeenshire Council and Richard's time and Julie's time accordingly from Aberdeen City Council. Where there are specific expenditures, whether it's consultants or whether it's other expenditures that are directly related to the achievement of the project, they will be charged in, but officer time is met by the respective council.
So just to follow up, Chair, if I may, then, do we have any sort of estimate, you know, how much this costs each council in terms of, you know, facilitating the City Region Deal?
Chair, it's not a figure I have to hand, but certainly can pull something together, because what we're keen to do as well is to make sure it's captured as in-kind funding. It's not just, you know, that's what we will do. Clearly we will, but it's important to get the totality of the costs associated. We'll capture it as in-kind, but happy to provide figures if that's required.
No, that'd be helpful, because I think it is important that, you know, it's shown that both councils are actually making quite a big contribution in kind. So that would be good.
Thank you, Councillor Lumsden. Yeah, I think it would be important that is reflected in the tables and things that we get showing the money that's coming from the different partners. I think it would be important that we reflect that going forward as well. So I think if we could get the figures, that would be useful. Any other questions? I noticed, Councillor Gifford, your hand's up, but I'm wondering if that's from the previous question. Yeah. Any other questions or comments on the paper? No, I'm not seeing anybody indicating. Are we content to agree the recommendations as they appear on page 3?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
Yes. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Wood, for that. Oh yes, Sirian, did you have a question, comment? I think you may be on mute if you want to come in.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry. In terms of the calculations on the relevant costs each councils, I have no idea where that stops and starts. I mean, I have no idea how many people are involved, and I don't know what sharing of. I mean, what we'd like to see, if we're going to do that and have a meaningful discussion on that, is to actually get the detail and understand exactly what the costs are. Because with great respect, it costs the council an awful lot more money to do what they do than it costs one to do what we do.
I think the idea would be that we would get the costs of the direct support that's been provided by officers to the projects that are within the deal, because what they're saying is that we would have had an opportunity to recharge that to the deal and for it to be part of that project setup. Given that that's not the way we set the deal up in the first place, it's not seen that would then, if we were actually putting costs against each project, it may reduce the amount of money that's available for those projects to spend on actually facilitating the work that they need. But I think it is important for us, because as we know, our deal, the makeup of our deal is different than a lot of cities and regions, because the public and private sector are coming together and the money is coming from different sources. But I think what we need to do is to show a true reflection of the contributions that are being made by each of the partners. But I think Mr. Wood was saying that he could draw up some figures that would relate to that in-kind support that the council is currently giving to the projects that are within the deal. Mm-hmm. But I don't know whether you want to come back in, Mr. Wood, around how we could actually show that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it can be difficult to get those figures, and that's really why we flagged it up as this in kind before. But it's not impossible to do that. You know, there are specific people that within Aberdeenshire Council that I'm aware of are directly involved in this, and we can put together some fairly robust estimates of that. The adding on of the on costs, etc. We can make all that clear in the information that comes back to committee, which will give you a fairly accurate indication of the time and therefore the cost that's been spent.
And you can give us some detail on that as well, please, Alan.
Yes, we'll do. We'll get as much detail as we can. I'd rather give you more detail than I would normally in a council position, so at least you understand the methodology behind it as well.
Okay.
You happy with that?
I'm going to wait and see.
Okay, yeah. Well, once that information is available, it gives us an opportunity to discuss that further, what's represented by that, and I think that's useful for transparency and other aspects.
If I may, Chair, I mean, put simply, the cost base of the councils and the way in which you conduct and the all analysis that you do is actually to suit you as a council. It isn't necessarily exactly what the CRD requires. So it'll be interesting to see just exactly how much it is and what's involved in it. I mean, I think the paper, I know we don't do papers the same way as you do papers, just as one example.
I think it's just for us, for our councils, if we reflect the amount of support that is going into the city region deal and the resource that's connected with that, whether it's a monetary contribution or indeed an in-kind support contribution, then I think it's important that that is reflected. But we can obviously have a discussion once those figures are brought forward by Mr. Wood at that stage.
I don't have a problem with that at all. What it will reflect is the very different cost base and the very different, with great respect, levels of, I'm going to use the word bureaucracy, that you have to have as a council to run as a council. And that's not the same as we have. We just don't have any of that. So let's wait and see what it looks like.
Yeah. Let's do that, and then we can reflect on it once we see those facts and figures before us. Okay, on that basis, are we content to agree the recommendations that are in the paper on page 3? Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reid, for that. That's helpful. Okay, that takes us on to item 7, which is our progress report and COVID-19 assessment. As mentioned at the beginning, there is a exempt appendices, which is item 8. Just to remind members, I'll perhaps take questions on item 7 first, because that can be heard in public. And then if we have questions in relation to item 8, the exempt appendices, we will have to move into private session to discuss those. And then we can come back into public session in order to determine the way forward. Okay. So if I could ask, does anybody, Ms. Richard Woods, do you want to say anything in connection with the item 7 public paper prior to me opening up for questions? Is there anything you wish to add?
I think the content, thank you, Chair. I think the content is in the report, and what the report's saying really is it's a bit early to say for most of the projects about the impact of COVID-19, but we do need to continue to monitor that when we start to get costs back for future projects, especially around construction and procurement, where we expect costs might rise. So at the moment, most of the projects you'll see are still delivering as planned, but we might hit significant issues down the line, and we just must continue to monitor that.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, the first question I've got is from Councillor Gifford.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to go back to what Julie just said about monitoring all the projects over the next while, because certainly in Aberdeenshire we were seeing significant construction inflation even before COVID kicked in, and I think that's going to be a challenge for all of us over the next while. Almost every capital project that we've been bidding, and a lot of them are pretty small town centre refurbishment jobs, what have you. They've all come in, bar 1 or 2, over the estimated cost. So I think it's something we need to be really, really on the ball with. And if we're seeing the projects across the piece struggling for finance because of construction inflation, I think we need to roll that into the discussions that we're having all the time with both governments about what additional funding might come in the back of the City Region deal to help us deliver these projects. So I think monitoring all of that is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, well made. In the city, we've obviously experienced similar situations with our capital projects, but I think if you look across the whole of Scotland, that's a similar picture. And as you've mentioned, I think that was before COVID-19 was factored into the equation, and it's clear that that is going to have a further impact as well. So I think it is important that we're looking at close eye on all the projects and what the financial situation will be moving forward. Councillor Lumsden, do you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just check here? And there's mention of the harbour project, and that they've been invited to a future meeting of the City Region deal. Do we know which meeting that will be as yet, or is it too early to tell?
Mr. Sweetnam, do you have information on that? Or?
So they were going to come to the last meeting of the joint committee. This is a special meeting, so conceivably they'd be able to come to the next meeting of the deal on schedule, and by that point the harbour will have more detail on their plans around the proportion of its project that's been retendered.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on the item 7 public paper? I'm not seeing anybody indicating. Do we have questions on item 8, which is the exempt paper? Right, I'm looking at a number of people nodding. So at this point then, we would move into private session. That means we will hold discussions with the public and press omitted. So we will stop the recording at this stage in order for us to determine that exempt business.
Okay, I'll just stop the recording now.
Okay, super. Thanks, Mr. Allen.